If I needed to drastically reduce my cortisol levels in 30 days, this is exactly how I would structure my day. It's what I would do in terms of when I would eat, how I would time my light exposure, the supplements that I would take, all spaced at the right time in the right dosages. Let's go ahead and break it down. After today's video, I put a link down below for 50% off Hiya Kids multivitamins. If you're watching this video, it's because your cortisol is probably high. If you have kids, your cortisol is probably high, right? You're not sleeping well, you're dealing with stress, you've got all kinds of problems, your own and your kids, right? You're dealing with a lot. So it makes sense, right? If your kids feel better, maybe they'll be a little bit easier. Probably not. But either way, you pay attention to your kids. So that link down below is for a monk fruit sweetened chewable multivitamin. My kids absolutely love them. They look forward to it every single night. And that is a 50% off discount link, and it can help you instill a good habit with your kids. It's not like you're having to give them some sugary vitamin just to get some nutrients in. It's a fun habit and a fun ritual from two dads that really knew what they were doing when they were starting this business. And it's a fun way to get your kids focused on health. So that link is down below for 50% off. First thing that I do is right when I wake up, even if I couldn't go outside and actually be in the sun, I would go sit by a window for just a small amount of time. Here's the crazy thing. You can actually get quite a bit of the photo benefit from just sitting by a window. Now, you don't get the same full body skin exposure serotonergic effect, but you get a mild mood boost and you get enough light that it can help reset the circadian rhythm a little bit. See, first thing in the morning, we need a little bit of the blue light. We actually need a combination. We need some of the full spectrum. We need some of that red light, that near infrared light, but we also need the blue light. And blue light ends up getting thrown under the bus all the time because we associate blue light with screens. But go outside, get a little bit of sunlight, and that can make a huge difference in your cortisol. But that's something that you've heard before. Now here's where things get a little wonky, because psychosomatic therapy journal research suggests that caffeine, first thing right when we wake up, is only going to piggyback on top of already high cortisol levels. But then some newer evidence came out over the last year suggesting that that isn't the case. The thing is that if you are someone that deals with chronically high cortisol, then it probably does matter. Right? So if you know your cortisol levels are high or you know you're super stressed out, you may want to just consider slightly delaying your caffeine. Now, we used to say 60 to 90 minutes, like Andrew Huberman had talked about that, 60 to 90 minutes. I don't think you even need that. I think the main thing to prioritize is that you get the sunlight first. That's the only thing that I would pay attention to. I think delaying it 60 or 90 minutes is way overkill. Your cortisol spike, if regulated, should start to come down right after you wake up. The problem is with a lot of people, it stays high and then people add caffeine and it goes higher. If you just step outside and get that sunlight first, or sit by a window, or at the very least, like use a red light panel for a little bit, your cortisol should start to come down and you're probably gonna have your coffee in like 15 or 20 minutes. It's a small concession, a small price to pay for a pretty significant drop in cortisol. I would start doing some pretty extreme things too. What that might mean is reducing carbohydrates with my morning meal altogether. Okay, here's the reason. There's evidence that suggests that when we have these blood sugar spikes and subsequent blood sugar crashes, that crash signifies stress to the body. That stress can elevate cortisol. Now, this is extra pronounced in people that are dealing with insulin resistance or some kind of metabolic dysfunction, over 94% of the population that deals with that. Point is that in the morning, it's a time that you could say, hey, let me reduce the carbohydrates and see if I could blunt any more of that cortisol effect. Now, what I want to make sure you do though, is make sure you get enough calories in breakfast, right? Because what we've found over the years, as far as body composition concerned, and a number of things, as a matter of fact, also a study published in Physiology Behavior, that when we undereat, we end up with high levels of cortisol. So there's a couple things to note here. Undereating, well, I need to lose weight. I'm stressed because I'm overweight, right? I get it, okay, but what you want to do is you want to allocate enough fat to that breakfast meal so that it's actually the most caloric meal of your day. This sounds so backwards, right? I talk about fasting on this channel. Why is this backwards from what I normally talk about? Because if you're dealing with high levels of cortisol, I wouldn't recommend just adding more fasting on. I wouldn't recommend skipping breakfast, not until you get things really under control, okay? So what I would suggest is having high protein, moderate fat for breakfast, but let that be the most calorically dense meal of the day. When we talk about lunch, it'll make more sense, but lunch needs to be slightly lower calorie and dinner actually needs to be the lowest calorie. But with breakfast, I want most of the calories coming from protein, and the fat is going to make up a lot of calories because fat is calorically dense. So by doing this, you're eliminating the blood sugar crash that's going to spike the cortisol, but you're also not getting yourself into that under-eating situation. The other thing that I would do with breakfast is I would add vitamin C along with breakfast. And if I can't eat vitamin C, and if I can't get vitamin C from a supplement, or I'd rather get it from food, I would add strawberries, or I would put bell peppers into an omelet and get the vitamin C that way. And if you are having some carbs, you could have golden kiwis, but it's a little too high carb for that breakfast meal. Strawberries are low glycemic. I'd be okay with some strawberries. But bell peppers are a great way to get vitamin C mixed into some eggs. Otherwise, take about 2 grams or 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C with breakfast, as it can significantly blunt cortisol and help bring down that early morning spike. The next thing that I would do is after breakfast, I would do everything in my possible power to go for a 5 or 10 minute walk. And I fully know that if you are busy and have high cortisol, the last thing you have time to do is go for a walk right before you have to leave for work. I get it, okay? It's not a must, but I promise you it would make a big difference, because there's a lot of evidence that suggests that walking can lower cortisol, especially after a meal, okay? Now, let's go ahead and skip over to lunch. Lunch is gonna be a medium-sized meal. I would recommend that you still have lunch be moderately low carb. I think it'd be okay to add some carbohydrates in, but I would recommend things like this. I would recommend some resistant starches. So possibly some sweet potato, more likely even like a potato that sounds crazy, it's been heated and cooled and has become a resistant starch. It's gonna have a lower effect in terms of blood sugar, and it's gonna have the fiber effect, which could have a positive effect. Now, what should this meal look like? As far as protein, I would recommend you go with a moderate amount of fat. So maybe like a relatively lean ground beef burger. Here's the interesting thing, is the actual gristle that's in a burger patty from the ground beef has this thing called glycine in it. And glycine is very good for the brain and calming for the brain, but it also has an impact on cortisol, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because I want you to supplement glycine later on. With lunch, I think that's the best time to add in fish oil supplements. Okay, omega-3s can modulate the inflammation, and the inflammation is actually a stressor. So the stressor from inflammation can actually increase cortisol. Now, the big thing that I want here is this is where, even more important than fish oil, you get magnesium-rich foods in. So try to have an ounce of 85 to 90% dark chocolate. You're getting the magnesium from the chocolate, but you're also getting this thing called epicatechin. Now, epicatechin does a couple of things. It increases nitric oxide production. Okay, this can increase blood flow to the brain, also increase blood flow overall, and have a subsequent effect on cortisol. There's also an increase in BDNF. Okay, this helps the brain be more neuroplastic, which can reduce stress and overall have a calming effect. So chocolate has a big thing. The flavonoids make a big difference, but also the magnesium in it itself. Now, if you can't get your hands on chocolate or you don't like chocolate, take 400 to 500 milligrams of like a dimagnesium malate, just a slow releasing magnesium. One thing that I didn't mention before that I should have mentioned around breakfast that I just realized is one of the main things we want to consume when we're trying to reduce cortisol is choline. We want choline and want these things like phosphatidylserine, which I'll explain what it is. Eggs are one of the best sources for that. So eggs with breakfast, that high fat, lower carbohydrate meal, right? High protein, high fat, low carb. Also like hard boiled eggs with lunch. Any chance to get that choline and phosphatidylserine in, which is a fat-soluble compound, which is very good for overall cell function. You can also take phosphatidylserine in supplemental form, and I would recommend it at lunch. It could definitely calm your brain. 300 to 800 milligrams is what we've seen in the clinical research to have a profound effect, or at least a statistically significant effect on cortisol levels. Now, here's an interesting thing. If cortisol reduction is your goal, doing a little bit of red light therapy after your workout could really help. So remember, we have our baseline cortisol levels, and then we have the spikes. The spikes are good, they should be there. But if you're chronically elevated and you're continually having spikes on top of that, the spikes are going really high, signaling stress, 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 right? A little bit of red light therapy post-workout can lower the cortisol after a workout, making it so you're getting some of the benefits of the workout, but maybe not quite all the oxidative stress, right? That could be a really important thing. Another piece that I should talk about with oxidative stress, and this is something that you can do either with lunch, but might even be better in the morning if you're more sensitive to it. I personally am a fan of Methylene Blue in this case. Now, I know there's controversy over Methylene Blue because it's technically synthetic, and I'll defer to Dr. Scott Schur, who I did a tremendous video deep dive on Methylene Blue with, really understands the inner workings, but it helps with what's called redox. So essentially, you're helping the mitochondria function a little bit better, and Methylene Blue works along with UV light. So if you're gonna be outside, it's not a bad idea to take methylene blue if you're comfortable with it at a low dose. We're talking maybe like a 4 milligram dose, because it might help rescue some of the mitochondrial function that might reduce some of the subsequent cortisol stress and the overall load or stress that causes a cortisol spike. Now, I handle methylene blue with very delicate gloves with people, because I know that some people are not very open to it. So full disclosure, this is my opinion. It's not something you have to do. Now we get into the dinner time meal. This is where things get interesting. This should be your lowest calorie meal of the day. It should be high protein, lower fat meat or something, right? If you don't eat meat, but high protein, low fat, and slow digesting carbohydrates. There was a study that was published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism. This was fascinating, found that increasing carbohydrate consumption, particularly in the evening time, increased serotonin, decreased cortisol levels, and improved sleep. Now, I'm not saying you go gorge yourself on carbohydrates, but what I am saying is even if you're metabolically unhealthy, you've kept your carbs very low throughout the day, this would be the time to add them in. It might be thinking, carbs, that's heavy. Well, it's gonna be lower calorie. Remember, you started your day with high protein, high fat. Then you went moderate protein, moderate fat. Now you're going low fat, moderate carb. The fat calories aren't there, so your calories are gonna be quite low, and you're gonna have the serotonergic effect and the insulin spike, which actually blunts cortisol. Because remember, you want cortisol to spike in the morning, have a few little spikes throughout the day, and then come down in the evening. The last thing you want to have is where you're so dysregulated that you're spiking at 2 or 3 in the morning, waking you up, making you get up because you're just awake, and then crash later, and that crash causing a stress response with cortisol going back up in the evening. Having the carbs can actually just bring you down. Trust me when I say it can make a big difference. A very, very, very important thing. There was a study published in Sleep and Biological Rhythms, found that a therapeutic clinical dose of 3 to 5 grams of glycine, which is a lot, but not that much, not only improves sleep, but helps calm the brain and has a significant effect on cortisol. Glycine can have an impact on what's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Adrenals, you've heard that before, stress, adrenals, cortisol, right? So with this, you have an impact on that whole axis that helps things communicate better and calm down. Okay, we want to calm down. So what I would recommend is collagen. I would recommend things like bone broth. These can make a really big difference because they're rich in glycine and have this calming effect. Now, if you don't eat those foods, again, you could do straight 3 grams of glycine, but it's hard to get glycine from food in like a 3-gram quantity, right? So you could supplement with it and get a significant amount. Or if you like bone broth, you like collagen, you could do that. But you could also add the glycine in. It's hard to overdo it with glycine unless you really went overboard. So high protein, moderate carb, things like sweet potatoes, maybe some plantains, maybe some butternut squash. Trust me, just by that carb allocation, it can make a big difference. Now, lastly, a few things that I would do to help before bed. Saffron. Strong evidence now with saffron. Dr. Andrew Huberman talked about it. I did a video a while back talking about the details. 28 grams of good quality saffron, or excuse me, 28 milligrams of good quality saffron. What that can do for sleep, particularly staying asleep, okay? Start of this cortisol dysregulation is not being able to stay asleep and having all your whole cycles disrupted. So we're trying to even out and sort of properly distribute the lighting, the calories, the carbohydrates, and the particular compounds that we're using to align better with sleep. So saffron, theanine, tryptophan, and 5-HTP. Tryptophan, I do about 1,000 milligrams. 5-HTP, I do 50 to 100 milligrams. Saffron, I do 20 to 30 milligrams. Theanine, I do 200 to 400 milligrams. And I would probably add a little more magnesium in there as well. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.